Welcome to Sober Without God. This series is designed to help you fall asleep while listening to stories about the scientists and non-believers who have made an impact on our world. You can find more in the Fall Asleep series playlist on this channel. If you're like me and have trouble going to sleep or staying asleep, videos like this may help you relax while also learning. It is my hope that hearing these stories in a calm and peaceful way will help guide you to the relaxation and sleep you're looking for. Before we begin, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, and also leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from. It's a big help to the channel and will encourage me to make more like this. My goal is to be able to make these videos ad-free as the channel continues to grow. These videos are here to pay homage to some of the greatest thinkers and innovators of our time while helping you relax and meditate or fall to sleep. So now let's settle into a comfortable position and get ready for some peaceful rest. Tonight, we turn our attention to the life and work of Sam Harris, philosopher, neuroscientist, writer, and one of the most prominent voices of modern atheism. As always, let's begin by settling in to the rhythm of breath. Inhale slowly, hold gently, and let it out even slower than it came in. Feel the surface beneath you. Feel the stillness around you and allow yourself to drift with the unfolding story. Sam Harris was born in April of 1967 in Los Angeles, California. His father, Berkeley Harris, was an actor. His mother, Susan Harris, was a screenwriter and television producer, best known for creating the iconic series The Golden Girls. From the beginning, Sam was surrounded by the world of stories and ideas. But unlike his mother's glamorous Hollywood scripts, the story Sam would write for himself would be one of philosophy, science, and radical honesty. Even as a child, Sam was drawn to the deepest questions of human life. Why are we conscious? Why do people believe in gods? How do we know what is true? He has said in interviews that his early years were not especially religious, but he grew up acutely aware of the divide between reason and faith. One of his later reflections captures this tension. Faith is nothing more than the license people give one another to keep believing when reasons fail. Sam studied at Stanford University, where philosophy pulled him into its orbit. Yet his education was interrupted in a profound way. During his time as a student, he experimented with psychedelic drugs, and those experiences left him fascinated by the mind. The question of consciousness became his obsession. What is the mind? Why does awareness exist? And how can we understand it scientifically? Rather than rushing to finish his degree, Sam left Stanford and traveled to India and Nepal. For over a decade, he immersed himself in meditation, contemplative practice, and Eastern philosophy. He studied under great teachers of Buddhism, learned the discipline of silent retreats, and wrestled with the paradox of searching for inner stillness while craving understanding. Years later, he would write, "Meditation is not about becoming a Buddhist. It is simply a tool for examining the nature of your own mind." This conviction that spiritual practice can exist without superstition would become a cornerstone of his work. Eventually, Sam returned to Stanford, completing his degree in philosophy. Then he pursued a doctorate in neuroscience at UCLA, focusing on the neural basis of belief, disbelief, and uncertainty. For him, science and meditation were not opposites. They were two paths toward the same horizon, understanding the mind. He explained, "My goal is to understand what it means to be conscious. That is the most important question we can ask." As you breathe, imagine Sam Harris, a young man, sitting cross-legged in the Himalayas, eyes closed, breathing slowly, searching for silence within silence. Now imagine him years later in a laboratory, wires and monitors all around, studying the electric dance of neurons, seeking the same truth from the opposite direction. This tension between the inner and the outer, between meditation and science, would define the rest of his life's work. And with that, Sam Harris stood ready to step into the public arena, a philosopher with both spiritual depth and scientific rigor. The world would soon come to know his name. By the early 2000s, Sam Harris was preparing to step fully into the public conversation. The world had just witnessed the events of September 11th, 2001, an attack that sharpened his concern about the dangers of religious faith. For years, Harris had studied the mechanics of belief in the lab. Now he wanted to address the consequences of belief in the real world. In 2004, he published his first book, The End of Faith. It was part philosophy, part critique, and part urgent warning. Harris argued that the willingness to believe without evidence, what he simply called faith, was not only irrational but dangerous. He said, "The problem with faith is that it is what people use to avoid thinking rationally about the world." The book became a bestseller, winning the PEN Award for Nonfiction. For many readers, it was a lightning bolt, a voice that named what they had long felt, but rarely heard articulated. 2 years later, Harris released a short, direct follow-up, Letter to a Christian Nation. If the end of faith was a sweeping critique, this was a laser-focused response to the flood of mail he had received, especially from American Christians. In it, he wrote plainly, "If one of us is right, the other is wrong. The Bible is either the Word of God or it isn't. Either Jesus offers the one true path to salvation or he doesn't." The book was brief but powerful, a personal letter to a whole country, challenging believers to examine their assumptions. Around this same time, Harris found himself in conversation with three other thinkers: Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, and Christopher Hitchens. Together they became known as the Four Horsemen of the New Atheism, where Dawkins came with evolutionary science, Dennett with philosophy of mind, and Hitchens with fiery polemic. Harris brought something different, a calm, methodical voice, grounding his arguments in both neuroscience and ethics. He often said, "The core of science is simply this: the refusal to lie to ourselves. Religion asks us to do exactly that." Harris quickly became known for his debates. Against William Lane Craig, he sparred over whether morality requires God. Against Reza Aslan, he argued about the roots of violence in Islam. And in countless conversations, he presented faith as not just unnecessary, but actively harmful. His style was precise, his tone rarely raised, but his words often cut with surgical sharpness. He said, "Faith inspires people to be certain of things they cannot possibly know. That is a recipe for ignorance, and often for violence." Imagine him at the debate stage, a slim figure in a dark suit, his voice steady, his eyes focused, as he explains, calmly and without flourish, why he believes reason must prevail over dogma. He was never trying to overwhelm with passion, only to invite clarity, as if saying, "Look carefully and see the truth for yourself." In those years, the voices of the Four Horsemen reached millions. But Sam Harris had a particular appeal. He wasn't only criticizing religion, he was also offering a vision of meaning and morality grounded in science and later in mindfulness. He was not simply trying to dismantle old beliefs. He was trying to show how we might live more consciously, more compassionately, without them. This was the moment when Sam Harris became a central figure in the conversation about belief and reason. His books were widely read, his debates widely watched, and his voice could no longer be ignored. The next stage of his journey would take him deeper into questions of morality, free will, and the search for meaning without religion. As Sam Harris's voice grew in influence, he stepped more frequently onto the stage of public debate. Here, in the glow of studio lights and lecture halls, he would sharpen his ideas against the arguments of believers and philosophers alike. One of his most famous encounters came against the Christian apologist William Lane Craig. The subject was morality. Craig argued that morality cannot exist without God. Harris countered that morality could and must be grounded in something else, the well-being of conscious creatures. Harris said, "The question is not whether morality can exist without religion, but whether we can find a science of human flourishing. That is the true landscape of morality." The debate was tense. Craig invoked scripture and divine command. Harris, calm and deliberate, pointed to human suffering, arguing that ethics does not require belief in the supernatural. Years later, Harris faced another heavyweight, Jordan Peterson. Their debates drew large crowds, eager to see reason and religion collide in a new way. Peterson defended the psychological utility of religious stories. He argued that myths and Bible traditions carry truths essential for meaning. Harris replied, with characteristic clarity, if the Bible were merely a collection of stories, we could treat it like any other literature. But when people claim divine authority for these texts, that is when reason must intervene. The debates stretched for hours, sometimes more like conversations than confrontations. Listeners came away with a sense of two very different visions of meaning. One rooted in tradition, the other in the clear light of evidence and rationality. In quieter moments, Harris also sat with Dawkins, Dennett, and Hitchens. Their recorded conversation, later called the Four Horsemen, captured the power of four minds grappling with the place of religion in the modern world, where Hitchens scorched with rhetoric. Harris offered precision, almost surgical. He said, believing things without evidence is not just an error, it's a betrayal of the very faculties that allow us to find truth. This balance of tone made Harris distinct. He was not a bomb thrower, but a steady hand, a philosopher who invited clarity above all. Out of these debates grew one of Harris's most ambitious books, The Moral Landscape. In it, he argued that science is not silent on morality. On the contrary, science can help us measure and navigate human well-being. He said, questions of right and wrong are really questions about the well-being of conscious creatures. And those are questions science can answer. The book placed him at the heart of a new discussion. Can values be grounded in facts? Can morality be studied like biology or physics? Critics pushed back, but Harris held firm. For him, the search for an evidence-based morality was the most urgent task of our time. Imagine Harris at the podium, his voice calm, never rushed, laying out his case with the rhythm of a scientist, yet the conviction of a philosopher. He is not angry. He is not mocking. He is simply steady, like water carving stone. Harris's debate style is not theatrical. It is not filled with passion or flair. Instead, it is methodical, a step-by-step unfolding of logic until the conclusion seems almost inevitable. He once observed, "What we need are not better faiths, but better conversations, ones grounded in reason, compassion, and a willingness to be wrong." This quiet insistence, this voice of rational calm, has made Sam Harris a distinctive figure in the modern landscape of skepticism and atheism. Take a deep breath in and let it out slowly. His debates stirred audiences. He was also preparing a new platform, one where he could expand beyond arguments and invite long, thoughtful discussions. That platform would become his podcast, and it would carry his voice to millions around the world. As the years went on, Sam Harris began searching for a format where he could stretch out, where ideas could be explored not in quick sound bites, but in the unhurried flow of conversation. This led to the creation of his podcast, first called Waking Up, and later renamed Making Sense. In this podcast, Harris invited scientists, philosophers, writers, and politicians to join him in conversations that often lasted 2 or 3 hours. There was no rush, no debate timer, no applause lines, just long form reflection. We need spaces, Harris once remarked, where people can think out loud, carefully, and without fear of being shouted down. The podcast quickly became one of the most respected in the world of ideas. Listeners appreciated its calm depth and the way Harris guided discussions with curiosity rather than confrontation. Some episodes explored science. Neuroscientist Anil Seth on the mystery of consciousness. Daniel Kahneman on human decision making. Richard Dawkins on evolution and atheism. Others ventured into politics and society. Andrew Yang on universal basic income. Political scientists and journalists discussing democracy and free speech. And still others went into spirituality and the inner life, teachers of meditation, experts in mindfulness, friends from his long years of contemplative practice. What made making sense unusual was Harris's willingness to sit with complexity. He often said, "We live in a culture that rewards outrage more than it rewards careful thought." On his show, careful thought was the rule. Each conversation unfolded slowly, like a calm walk through a dense forest. No single conclusion forced, but many insights gathered along the way. One recurring theme was Harris's rejection of free will. He argued that our sense of choice is an illusion, and that understanding this could make us more compassionate. He explained, "You are not free to choose what you choose. To truly see this is to feel compassion for even the worst among us." On his podcast, he explored this theme with neuroscientists and philosophers alike, inviting listeners to consider not just what is true, but how understanding truth could change how we live. In a media environment filled with shouting matches and hot takes, Harris offered something different: a measured, deliberate, sometimes even meditative voice. For many, listening to Making Sense felt less like consuming media and more like entering a space of quiet reflection where ideas could breathe. As you breathe now, imagine Harris and a guest across a quiet studio table. No audience, no cameras flashing, only two voices carefully exploring a question that matters. This too is his gift, not only to challenge dogma, but to model the art of thoughtful conversation. Take a deep breath in and hold and release slowly. Yet Harris's work was never only about conversation. Beyond books, debates, and podcasts, he was also building something more personal, a way of teaching meditation and secular spirituality to a wider world. This would become the next chapter of his journey, his waking up project, and the fusion of science with contemplative practice. Beyond his books and debates, Sam Harris turned increasingly to a theme that had shaped his own life for decades: the practice of meditation. This was not new to him. From his years in India and Nepal to his studies in neuroscience, he had long seen meditation not as a religious act, but as a scientific and personal exploration of the mind. To bring this vision to a wider audience, Harris launched his project, Waking Up, first as a book, then as a meditation app and teaching platform. Waking Up was designed to introduce mindfulness practices without the baggage of dogma or supernatural claims. The purpose of meditation, Harris explained, is not to become a Buddhist, but to discover what it's like to truly be aware, to experience consciousness directly. Through guided sessions and lessons, he helped listeners see that spiritual insight did not have to be tied to belief in gods or rituals, but could be a natural part of human experience. For Harris, meditation was not an escape from science, but an extension of it. He often reminded his audience, consciousness is the one thing in this universe we cannot deny. Everything else, even the universe itself, is known only through it. To sit quietly, to breathe slowly, to notice thoughts arising and passing, was for him an investigation as serious as any lab experiment. This approach set Harris apart in the secular community. Some atheists avoided words like spirituality, fearing they carried too much religious weight. But Harris was unafraid to use the term. For him, spirituality meant nothing more and nothing less than the direct exploration of consciousness. You don't need faith to be spiritual, he said. You need only awareness. By framing meditation in this way, he offered a bridge between the rational skeptic and the seeker of inner depth. In his guided meditations, Harris often encouraged simple awareness, noticing sounds, sensations, breath, the mystery of simply being conscious. As you listen now, you might notice those things too. The air on your skin, the rhythm of your breathing, the way thoughts appear and dissolve again. This was the essence of his teaching: to wake up from the trance of distraction and to meet reality directly. Harris's vision of meditation and spirituality was radical because it removed every trace of supernaturalism. He argued that the same awe we feel when staring at the night sky, the same stillness we find in silence, is available to all of us without recourse to gods or holy books. You can be spiritual without being religious, he insisted. In fact, you can find the deepest meaning once you let go of superstition. Take a long, gentle breath in and hold. Now release slowly. This blending of science and meditation, of skepticism and spirituality, has become one of the most distinctive aspects of Sam Harris's life. He does not only argue against false beliefs, he also offers a path toward clarity, toward awareness, toward what he simply calls waking up. And yet, Harris was never only a teacher of meditation. Alongside these practices, he continued to write, to debate, and to speak on some of the most urgent issues of ethics and society. In the next stage of his journey, his work would bring him into conversations about politics, about violence and extremism, and about the challenge of living wisely in a divided world. As Harris's influence grew, so too did the controversies that surrounded him. He was never one to soften his words, and when he believed an idea was dangerous, he said so plainly, whether it concerned religious ideas, politics, or the boundaries of free speech. One of Harris's most debated positions concerned Islam. He argued that unlike many religions, Islam contained elements within its scripture and traditions that made it especially vulnerable to extremist interpretations. The doctrine of martyrdom in Islam, Harris said, is a license to kill and to be killed, and that makes it uniquely dangerous. These comments brought him fierce criticism. Some accused him of bigotry, while others praised his honesty in confronting uncomfortable truths. In debates with writers like Reza Aslan and journalists like Glenn Greenwald, Harris defended his stance, insisting that criticizing ideas should never be confused with attacking people. He said, "We have to be able to criticize bad ideas, and Islam, at this moment in history is the motherlode of bad ideas. Connected to these controversies was Harris's broader defense of free speech. He believed that silencing difficult conversations only drove extremism underground. He said, free speech is not a luxury. It is the foundation of all free thought. Even when his own views provoked outrage, he maintained that protecting open dialogue was essential for science, for ethics, for democracy itself. In recent years, Harris also waded into political waters. He commented on American elections, on culture wars, and on the deep polarization dividing societies. He spoke out against authoritarianism and against what he called the tribalism of politics. At times, his position alienated former allies. He criticized both the religious right and the excesses of the political left. For Harris, truth mattered more than party loyalty. He said, our allegiance must be to reality itself, not the tribes or ideologies. These positions often made Harris a lightning rod. Some saw him as courageous, others as reckless, but always his voice remained steady, the same calm cadence that had marked his books and debates. He was not interested in pleasing everyone. He was interested in speaking clearly, and whether one agreed with him or not, his arguments sparked conversations that would not otherwise have happened. Imagine the tension of these debates, the sparks of disagreement, the criticisms from every side. And then imagine Harris himself sitting quietly, his tone unchanged, as he lays out his reasoning word by word, idea by idea, without ever raising his voice. For Harris, the path was never about popularity. It was about truth, reason, and the moral responsibility to challenge dangerous illusions. In the next stage of his story, we'll see how he continued to balance controversy with clarity, and how his work in both philosophy and meditation led him to become one of the most unusual voices in modern thought. As Sam Harris moved further into the later chapters of his career, his focus began to broaden from debates and controversies toward a quieter but equally powerful project, helping people see their minds more clearly. As his Waking Up app continued to expand, he reached hundreds of thousands of people across the world. Each day, new listeners encountered guided meditations, conversations on philosophy, and lessons in awareness. Unlike his public debates, these teachings were not about winning arguments. They were about guiding people toward clarity. The mind is all we have, Harris reminded his audience. To understand it is the beginning of wisdom. One of his most enduring themes has been his critique of free will. Harris argued that our sense of choosing freely is an illusion produced by causes we do not control. Thoughts simply appear in consciousness, he explained. You don't choose them, they choose you. For many, this idea was unsettling, but for Harris, it was liberating, a way to cultivate compassion. If no one truly chooses their actions, then even wrongdoing must be seen in a new light as the product of circumstances, not of some autonomous self floating free of cause and effect. And now, a collection of select Sam Harris quotes. In fact, atheism is a term that should no longer exist. No one ever needs to identify himself as a non-astrologer or a non-alchemist. We do not have words for people who doubt that Elvis is still alive or that aliens have traversed the galaxy only to molest ranchers and their cattle. Atheism is nothing more than the noises reasonable people make in the presence of unjustified religious beliefs. I know of no society in human history that ever suffered because its people became too desirous of evidence in support of their core beliefs. We have a choice. We have two options as human beings. We have a choice between conversation and more. That's it. Conversation and violence. And faith is a conversation stopper. Consider it. Every person you have ever met, every person will suffer the loss of his friends and family. All are going to lose everything they love in this world. Why would one want to be anything but kind to them in the meantime? If someone doesn't value evidence, what evidence are you going to provide to prove that they should value it? If someone doesn't value logic, what logical argument could you provide to show the importance of logic? Theology is ignorance with wings. Tell a devout Christian that his wife is cheating on him, or that frozen yogurt can make a man invisible, and he is likely to require as much evidence as anyone else, and to be persuaded only to the extent that you give it. Tell him that the book he keeps by his bed was written by an invisible deity who will punish him with fire for eternity if he fails to accept its every incredible claim about the universe, and he seems to require no evidence whatsoever. Either God can do nothing to stop catastrophes like this, or he doesn't care to, or he doesn't exist. God is either impotent, evil, or imaginary. Take your pick and choose wisely. The only sense to make of tragedies like this is that terrible things can happen to perfectly innocent people. This understanding inspires compassion. Religious faith, on the other hand, erodes compassion. Thoughts like, this might be all part of God's plan, or there are no accidents in life, or everyone on some level gets what he or she deserves. These ideas are not only stupid, they are extraordinarily callous. They are nothing more than a childish refusal to connect with the suffering of other human beings. It is time to grow up and let our hearts break at moments like this. A puppet is free as long as he loves his strings. What I'm asking you to entertain is that there is nothing we need to believe on insufficient evidence in order to have deeply ethical and spiritual lives. It is time that we admitted that faith is nothing more than the license religious people give one another to keep believing when reasons fail. You can do what you decide to do, but you cannot decide what you will decide to do. Man is manifestly not the measure of all things. This universe is shot through with mystery. The very fact of its being and of our own is a mystery absolute, and the only miracle worthy of the name. What makes Sam Harris unusual is the way he holds two worlds together. He is a scientist grounded in evidence, a skeptic who dismantles superstition, but he is also a contemplative, speaking of silence, awareness, and the mystery of being conscious at all. Few figures have tried to live so fully at the intersection of reason and spirituality. For Harris, the two are not enemies. They are complementary paths to truth. Today, Harris continues to write, to podcast, and to teach. He is a critic of religion, a philosopher of ethics, a guide in meditation, defender of open inquiry. His voice remains calm, never theatrical, but precise, deliberate, like a clear stream flowing through a noisy world. He once said, "Our task is to build a civilization that is sane, compassionate, and awake, and that begins with each of us." As you sit with these words, imagine Sam Harris's journey not as a series of battles, but as a continuous search for clarity, for compassion, for ways of being human without illusions. This is his legacy, a voice of reason, a hand pointing gently toward awareness, a reminder that truth matters, and that awakening is always